The first time Alpha King Nathan Whitlock truly looked at Hannah Miller, she had already stopped looking at him. For 5 years before that, she had been a quiet shape near the edge of his throne room. Not invisible. Worse, useful. The royal court was already in session when Hannah stepped behind the marble pillars with a stack of council notes pressed against her chest. Gold candlelight spilled over the polished floor. Nobles stood in careful clusters beneath the silver banners of Whitlock House. Guards lined the walls in black ceremonial armor, faces still, hands resting near their blades. At the center of it all sat Nathan Whitlock. Cold, beautiful, untouchable. The Alpha King did not need to raise his voice to command a room. He only had to turn his head, and men remembered their rank. He only had to lift one hand, and the court rearranged itself around his silence. Hannah watched him from the side of the hall. She knew she should not. She always did anyway. Nathan leaned slightly toward his chief advisor, listening without blinking. His left hand rested against the arm of the throne. When Lord Bennett began speaking from the lower floor, Nathan's fingers tightened once. Hannah noticed. Lord Bennett was lying. She opened the top page of her notes and quietly marked a line beside the border tax report. Nathan would need that correction soon. He always did when a lord lied politely enough to sound loyal. A young page hurried toward her, pale and breathless. "Miss Miller," he whispered, "His Majesty is asking for the Eastern trade records." Hannah did not search. She did not hesitate. She slid the correct folder from the middle of the stack and handed it over. "Tell him the second seal is false," she said softly. The original was signed in black wax, not blue. The page blinked. "How did you go?" He went. Across the room, Nathan accepted the folder without looking toward her. That should not have hurt anymore. Hannah had trained herself not to expect small things. A glance, a nod. Her name said with warmth instead of function. Still, expectation was stubborn when it had survived on less than hope. The court moved on. A noblewoman laughed near the western arch. An elder cleared his throat. A servant replaced Nathan's tea before it cooled too far, though Hannah knew it was already too sweet. Nathan hated honey in black tea. He would drink it anyway because no one had remembered. No one except her. She took one quiet step forward, then stopped. Not her place. That had become the shape of her life. Close enough to notice. Far enough not to matter. For 5 years, Hannah had loved him like that. In corrected documents. In warned servants. In tea sent back before it reached his hand. In silent prayers before battle councils. In memorizing the exact pause before his temper became dangerous. No one called it love. The palace called her reliable. The council called her efficient. Nathan called her useful when he remembered to call her anything at all. A murmur spread through the hall as the page reached the throne. Nathan opened the folder, read the marked seal, and looked toward Lord Bennett. The room chilled. "You forged a border record," Nathan said. Lord Bennett went white. Hannah lowered her gaze before anyone could turn. She had saved him from embarrassment again. Quietly, correctly, without being seen. And then, as Nathan's command cut through the court like winter steel, Hannah looked at him once more from behind the marble pillar. Not with demand. Not with hope loud enough to shame her. Only with the old, gentle ache of someone who had admired the sun for years while knowing it would never turn toward her. She did not know yet that the ache was nearing its end. She only knew that when Nathan finished condemning Lord Bennett, his eyes swept across the hall. Over nobles. Over guards. Over servants. Over her. And kept going. Hannah Miller knew the Alpha King's habits better than she knew her own. That was the first truth she had mistaken for devotion. Nathan Whitlock took his tea bitter, almost black, with no honey. He disliked blue ink on military documents because blue faded strangely beneath council lamps. He read reports from the bottom paragraph, first when he suspected a noble was hiding something. He tightened his left hand when a lie irritated him, but touched the edge of his signet ring when he was truly angry. Hannah knew all of it. Not because anyone had taught her. Because she had watched him for years. Quietly. Carefully. Like watching too openly might turn admiration into something shameful. After the court session ended, the throne room emptied in waves. Nobles bowed. Advisors gathered documents. Guards opened the tall silver doors, letting cold daylight spill across the marble floor. Hannah stayed behind the pillar until Nathan stood. That was another habit. She never moved before he did. Not because he had ordered it. because some foolish part of her had built a life around his direction. A page hurried past carrying the wrong stack of trade records. Hannah reached out gently and stopped him. "Not those," she said. "His Majesty needs the treaty summaries for the Northern Envoy." The boy looked down, panicked. "I thought they are tax records. Third cabinet. Red ribbon. Hurry." He nodded and ran. A council clerk nearby sighed with relief. "Miss Miller, I don't know what we would do without you." Hannah smiled politely. "People said that often. I don't know what we would do without you. They never meant, you matter. They meant, please keep fixing things." Nathan passed through the central aisle with his chief advisor beside him. He did not slow as he neared Hannah. His coat brushed the air with the scent of cedar, iron, and winter wind. Her fingers tightened around the notes before she could stop them. "Miss Miller," he said. "Not Hannah. Never Hannah unless something was urgent." "Yes, Your Majesty. The Greyhaven envoy arrives tonight. Prepare the border files." "They are already prepared." He paused then, only slightly. His gaze touched her face. For one brief second, Hannah felt the old warmth rise in her chest. Dangerous. Immediate. Ridiculous. Nathan looked down at the papers in her arms. "Good." Then he walked on. One word. "Good." 5 years ago, she would have carried that word back to her room and held it like a secret gift. Tonight, she only noticed how little it weighed. The chief advisor glanced back at her with mild amusement. "She always knows before you ask," he said to Nathan. Nathan's answer drifted behind him as they turned toward the council hall. "That is why she is useful." Useful. The word was not new. Hannah had heard it before. From clerks. From elders. From servants who depended on her memory. But from Nathan, it settled differently. Lower. Colder. As if the palace had finally given a name to the shape she had mistaken for closeness. She stood in the emptying throne room while voices faded into corridors and servants began clearing the tables. Useful. Not cherished. Not seen. Not chosen. Useful. A servant approached with a tray of untouched tea. "Miss Miller, should I remake His Majesty's cup for the council room?" Hannah looked at the honeyed black tea. Too sweet. Wrong again. Her first instinct was to correct it. "No honey. Fresh leaves. Steeped shorter." The thought came as naturally as breathing. That frightened her. Because love should not feel like being trained to prevent someone else's discomfort before they noticed it. For a moment, she said nothing. The servant waited. Hannah looked toward the corridor where Nathan had disappeared. Then back at the tea. "Yes," she said softly. "Remake it." The servant turned. Hannah added, "But ask him how he wants it." The girl blinked. "His Majesty?" "Yes." A small silence passed between them. The servant did not understand. That was all right. Hannah was only beginning to. She gathered the remaining notes and walked toward the Eastern Archive. The court behind her returned to motion. Chairs scraped. Doors opened. Orders passed through the hall. Everything continued as it always had. Almost. Because for the first time in 5 years, Hannah Miller had let one small thing go unfixed. 5 years earlier, Nathan Whitlock had given Hannah Miller a reason to stay close. Not a promise. Not even kindness large enough to build a future on. Just a cloak. A hand. A sentence spoken in falling snow. That was all. And somehow, Hannah had turned it into a place to live. The winter festival had been crowded that year, the palace courtyard filled with silver banners, lantern smoke, roasted chestnuts, and the restless movement of nobles pretending not to be cold. Hannah had not belonged there. Not really. She had been a junior archive assistant then, knew enough that most people forgot her name and polite enough that they did not feel guilty about it. She remembered standing near the outer steps with a tray of sealed messages, trying to keep out of the way. Then the crowd surged. A group of young warriors pushed through too quickly, laughing, careless with their shoulders and ceremony wine. Someone struck her arm. The tray tilted. Papers scattered across the wet stone. Hannah bent to gather them. Another body shoved past. Her knee hit the ground. Cold soaked through her dress immediately. A few people glanced down. No one stopped. That part she remembered clearly. Not the fall. The way the world continued around it. Then a shadow crossed the snow. The noise changed. Not disappeared. Changed. People stepped back before they knew why. Hannah looked up and saw Nathan Whitlock standing above her. He had not been king yet. Only the crown prince. Only the most dangerous man in the courtyard, with black hair touched by snow and gray eyes that seemed to make winter itself seem warmer by comparison. He looked at the scattered papers. then at the men who had shoved past. The laughter died. "Pick them up," he said. The warriors froze. Hannah froze too. Nathan did not raise his voice. He did not need to. One by one, the men bent, gathering every sealed message from the ground. A noblewoman quickly stepped aside. A servant hurried forward. The courtyard shifted around Nathan's silence like water around stone. Hannah tried to stand before anyone noticed her trembling. Her ankle gave slightly. Nathan's hand caught her elbow. Firm. Steady. Not gentle exactly, but careful enough that her breath stopped. "Can you walk?" She nodded too quickly. "Yes, Your Highness." His gaze lowered to her wet sleeve, then to the thin shawl slipping from her shoulder. "You're cold." It was such an obvious statement. Still, her heart moved toward it like it had been starving. Before she could answer, Nathan unclasped the dark winter cloak from his shoulders and placed it around hers. The warmth covered her first, then his scent. Cedar, smoke, snow. Something clean and sharp that made the entire courtyard feel farther away. Hannah's fingers closed around the edge of the cloak. "I can't take this." "You can. But stay close," Nathan said. Her eyes lifted to his. He was already looking toward the palace steps, toward the guards, toward whatever duty had been waiting for him before she became a small interruption in his path. "It's safer near me." That was the sentence. Not "I see you." Not "you matter." Not "I will protect you." Stay close. It's safer near me. A practical instruction. A passing mercy. The kind of thing a prince might say to anyone smaller than the danger around them. Hannah did not understand that then. Or maybe she refused to. She walked behind him through the courtyard while servants whispered and nobles parted. The cloak dragged slightly at her ankles. Her hands shook inside the warmth of it. By the time they reached the archive entrance, Nathan had already moved on to speak with the guard captain. He did not look back. Hannah did. For years afterward, she remembered that moment as the beginning of something. The first time he noticed her. The first time he protected her. The first time the world made room because she stood near him. She kept the silver ribbon that had tied the cloak closed. Not the cloak itself. That was returned to the royal wardrobe before dawn. But the ribbon had fallen loose inside her sleeve, and no one asked for it. So she kept it. Folded. Hidden. Foolish. A small silver proof that once, for one brief walk through snow and lantern light, Nathan Whitlock had made her feel chosen. Now, standing in the Eastern Archive 5 years later with border files spread beneath her hands, Hannah looked at that same ribbon tucked between the pages of her private journal. It should have looked pathetic. Instead, it looked honest. A girl had been cold. A prince had been kind. And loneliness had mistaken kindness for destiny. Hannah touched the ribbon once. Lightly. Then closed the journal. Some cages were made of iron. Hers had been made of one sentence, one winter cloak, and 5 years of standing close enough to be useful, far enough to never be held. The diplomatic banquet began with music soft enough to hide every small cruelty. Hannah Miller stood near the eastern arch with a folded cloak over her arm and the Greyhaven border files pressed against her chest. Candlelight moved across the ballroom in gold waves. Nobles drifted between tables with polished smiles. Advisors spoke in low voices. Guards watched the doorways, stiff and silent beneath silver banners. At the center of the room stood Alpha King Nathan Whitlock. Not on his throne tonight. Worse, among them. Close enough for people to believe they mattered. Far enough that no one forgot he was still the most powerful man in the hall. Hannah watched him without meaning to. Old habits did not die because one small thing had been left unfixed. They lingered. They waited. They reached for the familiar shape of devotion. Nathan was speaking with a newly arrived noblewoman near the western balcony. Clara West. Hannah knew her name because Hannah had written it in 3 places that afternoon. Guest ledger. Seating order. Border alliance notes. Clara was beautiful in the kind of effortless way courts rewarded. Tall. Graceful. Golden-haired. Wrapped in deep green silk that made half the room glance twice. Nathan listened as she spoke. Actually listened. His body turned toward her. His eyes stayed on her face. When Clara smiled, he did not look past her toward an advisor or a treaty folder or a problem waiting to be solved. He smiled back. Not much, but enough. Enough to make something inside Hannah go quiet. A servant stopped beside her. "Miss Miller, should I bring His Majesty's cloak?" "The balcony doors are open." Hannah looked at the cloak over her arm. She had brought it before anyone asked. Of course she had. Nathan disliked drafts near his left shoulder after battle injuries, healed badly in winter. No one else remembered. No one else had noticed the small way his hand moved when cold air touched old scar tissue. Hannah had. For years. She looked back across the room. Clara touched her bare arms and gave a little shiver. Nathan noticed immediately. He removed his own black cloak from his shoulders and placed it around Clara's. The movement was simple, smooth, natural. No hesitation. No need for instruction. No page whispering that someone was cold. No Hannah standing nearby with the answer already prepared. He had seen Clara's discomfort before it became inconvenient. The servant beside Hannah whispered, "Oh," then quickly looked away, realizing too late that pity had made a sound. Hannah did not move. The cloak in her arms suddenly felt absurd. Heavy with all the years she had mistaken observation for closeness. Across the room, Clara laughed softly, drawing Nathan's attention again. He leaned closer to hear her over the music. His expression shifted in a way Hannah knew too well from memory, though she had rarely seen it directed at her. Focused, present, almost gentle. So he could do that. The thought arrived without anger. That made it worse. Nathan Whitlock knew how to see someone. He knew how to notice cold skin. He knew how to offer warmth before being asked. He knew how to listen as if the world could wait. He had simply never chosen to spend that gentleness on her. Hannah lowered her gaze to the cloak she still held. 5 years ago, a winter cloak had become the beginning of her devotion. Tonight, another cloak became the end of her misunderstanding. A council clerk approached, unaware of the small funeral happening inside her chest. "Miss Miller, His Majesty may need the Greyhaven files soon." "Yes," Hannah said. Her voice was calm. The clerk nodded toward Nathan and Clara. "Should I interrupt?" Hannah looked once more. Clara stood wrapped in Nathan's cloak beneath golden light. Nathan's hand rested briefly near her shoulder, not possessive, not careless, just attentive enough to be unmistakable. "No," Hannah said softly. "He is occupied." The words tasted familiar. Servants said them often when Nathan missed meetings with her. Advisors said them when she waited outside council doors. She had said them to herself whenever disappointment needed a polite name. He is occupied. Tonight, for the first time, Hannah heard what the sentence really meant. He is choosing where to place his attention, and it is not here. A quiet laugh rose from the balcony. Nathan's laugh followed, lower, rarer. Hannah felt it land somewhere old, somewhere tired. Then she folded the unused cloak once. Carefully, neatly, as if tidying away a life she could no longer justify. The ballroom continued glowing. The music continued playing. Nathan continued looking at Clara West as though she were a person in front of him, not a function waiting at the edge of his command. Hannah turned from the balcony and walked toward the side corridor with the border files in her arms. No scene, no tears, no accusation, only the soft, final knowledge that the man she had admired for years had never been incapable of tenderness. He had simply been capable of withholding it from her. The sentence that ended 5 years of Hannah Miller's devotion was spoken behind a half-open library door. Not loudly, not cruelly enough for witnesses. That almost made it worse. Cruelty shouted in public could be blamed on pride, wine, politics, the need to appear untouchable before a watching court. But truth spoken quietly had nowhere to hide. After leaving the ballroom, Hannah carried the Greyhaven border files through the eastern corridor toward the Royal Library. The music faded behind her with every step. Gold light gave way to blue shadows. Rain touched the tall windows in thin silver streaks, soft enough to sound like someone trying not to cry. She was not crying. That surprised her less than it should have. Something colder than grief had begun settling in its place. The unused cloak remained folded over her arm. She had meant to return it to the wardrobe chamber. Instead, she still carried it, absurdly careful with the fabric, as though Nathan's comfort remained her responsibility even after she had watched him give warmth to someone else without being asked. At the turn before the library, she heard voices. Nathan's first, then his chief advisor, Marcus Hale. Hannah slowed, not to listen. She had told herself that lie before. Tonight, she was too tired to believe it. The library door was not fully closed. A narrow bar of amber light spilled across the corridor floor. Inside, glasses touched softly. Papers shifted. The air held the dry scent of old books and burning cedar. Marcus spoke with amusement in his voice. "Clara West made quite an impression tonight. She is politically useful, Nathan replied. Hannah stopped at the edge of the light. Useful. Again. The word waited for her everywhere now. Marcus chuckled. Only politically? A pause. Not long. Long enough. She is intelligent, Nathan said. Composed. Well-bred. The court likes her. Unlike Miss Miller. Hannah's fingers went still on the border files. Inside the library, silence lasted one breath. Then Nathan said, Hannah is not for court. No anger. No shame. Just assessment. Like she was a document placed in the wrong folder. Marcus lowered his voice slightly, but not enough. She watches you as if you hung the moon. Hannah felt the corridor tilt around that sentence. Not because it was untrue. Because Nathan did not sound surprised when he answered. I know. 2 words. Soft. Certain. Fatal. Hannah did not move. She could not. For years, she had hidden her admiration beneath work, beneath discipline, beneath neatly stacked reports and perfectly timed corrections. She had believed it was her private humiliation, something only she carried, something Nathan did not see because powerful men rarely noticed quiet women unless they needed them. But he knew. He had always known. Marcus sighed. And you allow it? Nathan's answer came smoothly. She asks for nothing. A small laugh from Marcus. That is rare in this palace. That makes her useful. The files in Hannah's arms suddenly felt too heavy. Not because the paper weighed much. Because every year inside them had weight. Every early morning spent preparing reports before Nathan woke. Every cup of bitter tea corrected before it reached his hand. Every lie marked in a margin. Every wound hidden behind efficiency. Every time she had stood near enough to help and far enough not to embarrass him with wanting more. She asked for nothing. That makes her useful. There it was. Not misunderstanding. Not blindness. Not a tragic failure to notice the woman waiting in the corner of his life. He had noticed. He had understood. And he had let her quiet love become another resource of the crown. Marcus spoke again. Do you never worry she will tire of it? Nathan's answer was immediate. No. Hannah's breath stopped. She has admired me for years, he continued. People do not let go of that kind of devotion easily. The words entered her slowly. Not like a knife. Like a key. Turning. Opening the last locked place where hope had been hiding. Inside the library, conversation moved on. Greyhaven tariffs. Clara's family connections. The risk of appearing too lenient at the border negotiations. Important things. Things Nathan considered worth the full weight of his attention. Hannah stepped back from the light. Carefully. Quietly. The cloak over her arm slipped slightly. She caught it by reflex. Then looked down at it. 5 years ago, she had built a dream from a cloak. Tonight, she stood outside another room holding one, while the man she loved explained the convenience of being loved by someone who never asked to be loved back. For one moment, Hannah imagined entering, setting the files down, looking Nathan in the eye, telling him exactly what his certainty had cost her. But no, that would be asking for something. An apology, a reaction, a wound large enough for him to finally acknowledge. She would not give him that satisfaction. She would not make her heartbreak another task he could manage. So Hannah placed the Greyhaven files on the small table beside the library door. Neatly, precisely, the way she had done everything for him. Then she set the folded cloak beside them. And used. Unneeded. Returned. No note. No explanation. If Nathan wanted meaning, for once, he could do the work of finding it himself. Hannah turned away from the library. Her steps were quiet against the marble. Behind her, Nathan Whitlock continued speaking with the steady confidence of a king who believed devotion was permanent because it had never asked him for proof. By the time Hannah reached the dark end of the corridor, something inside her had changed completely. She did not hate him. That would have required staying close. She did not want to punish him. That would have required believing his regret could heal her. She simply stopped. Stopped reaching. Stopped waiting. Stopped turning every small kindness into a promise. Stopped looking toward the throne as if the sun might finally notice the flower dying in its shadow. And in the silence that followed, Hannah Miller understood a truth so clean it almost felt merciful. Letting go did not begin with leaving the palace. It began with no longer wanting to be seen by the man who had watched her all along and chosen not to see her kindly. Hannah Miller did not cry outside the library. She simply walked away. That was the first change. Not the largest, not the loudest, but the first. For 5 years, walking away from Nathan Whitlock had felt impossible, even when he was not looking at her. Especially then. Her body had learned to remain near him the way flowers lean toward sunlight, even when the warmth was not meant for them. Tonight, her body kept moving. One corridor, then another, past the silver-framed portraits of dead Whitlock kings, past the east windows where rain blurred the palace gardens, past two servants who bowed and waited for instructions she did not give. Hannah's hands were empty now. No border files, no cloak, no excuse to return. That emptiness should have made her panic. Instead, it felt unfamiliar, almost light. She reached the quiet alcove near the archive staircase and stopped only because her reflection waited in the dark glass. For a moment, she looked at herself. A soft white American girl with pale skin, round cheeks, gentle eyes, and a body court women had learned to describe with polite little smiles. Sweet, pleasant, reliable, never dangerous enough to envy, never stunning enough to fear, never important enough to watch closely. Hannah had spent years trying to become valuable in other ways. If she could not be the woman Nathan noticed, she would become the woman he needed. If she could not be chosen, she would become indispensable. If he would not look at her face, he would at least look at her work. That was the second truth she had mistaken for devotion. A person should not have to become useful to earn the right to stand in the room. The thought came quietly, then stayed. Behind her, the palace continued its elegant breathing. Music from the ballroom drifted through the corridors. Laughter rose, softened by distance. Somewhere in the royal library, Nathan was still discussing tariffs, Clara West, and the usefulness of a woman who asked for nothing. Hannah touched her wrist. There, beneath the sleeve of her dress, a thin silver ribbon was tied once around her pulse. The same ribbon from the winter cloak. She had worn it tonight without admitting why. A private foolishness. A hidden prayer. Maybe he would remember. Maybe he would see it. Maybe the same man who once gave her warmth would notice the girl who had kept a piece of that moment alive for 5 years. Slowly, Hannah untied the ribbon. Her fingers did not tremble. That surprised her. Then it did not. The shaking belonged to hope. Hope had been louder than grief. Hope had kept her waiting outside doors, correcting his tea, memorizing his moods, turning crumbs into feasts. Without hope, there was only clarity. Cold, clean, almost kind. She folded the ribbon once. Then again, not angrily, not dramatically. She did not tear it. She did not throw it into the rain. She had loved the girl who kept it. That girl had survived loneliness the only way she knew how. Hannah would not punish her for needing something soft to believe in. Instead, she opened her private journal, tucked beneath a stack of archive ledgers in the alcove drawer, and placed the ribbon between 2 blank pages. Then she closed the journal. This time, she did not hide it. She left it there, visible, finished. A page hurried down the corridor, saw her, and stopped. Miss Miller, His Majesty is asking where the Greyhaven files are. Hannah looked at him. They are beside the library door. The boy blinked. He asked for you to bring them in. Yesterday, that would have been enough. Yesterday, her heart would have answered before her pride could stand. Yesterday, she would have lifted the files, stepped into the light, and pretended not to hear the echo of her own humiliation. Tonight, Hannah only said, "Then he may pick them up." The page stared. Not because the words were rude. They were not. Because they were new. Miss Miller. Her voice remained soft. "I am done for the evening. But His Majesty has the files." The boy swallowed. A small silence opened between them. Inside it, Hannah felt something shift again. A habit breaking did not sound like thunder. Sometimes it sounded like a young page realizing the quiet woman at the edge of the court was not moving simply because the king had asked. Hannah turned from him and walked toward the archive rooms. Not quickly, not fleeing, just leaving the place where she had been expected to wait. The next morning, she did not stand at the end of the royal corridor. She did not send corrected tea to the council chamber. She did not replace the blue ink before Nathan saw it. She did not mark the false seal in red. She arrived at her desk after sunrise, not before, and began cataloging old border letters with steady hands. When Nathan passed the open archive door, the entire corridor changed around him. Servants bowed. Guards straightened. Pages stepped aside. Hannah did not look up. She felt him pause. Just barely. A small interruption in a king's perfect rhythm. For 5 years, she had known exactly when his eyes passed over her. Today, she did not lift her face to meet them. "Hannah," he said. Not Miss Miller. Her name. The old Hannah would have lived a month on that. The woman at the desk dipped her pen into black ink. Yes, Your Majesty? A pause. Longer this time. You were not in the corridor this morning. No. I needed the revised border index. It is in the second cabinet. Another pause. You usually bring it. Hannah turned a page. Yes. Nathan stood very still in the doorway. She could feel his confusion before she saw it. He had expected explanation. Apology. A quick return to the shape she had occupied for years. But Hannah gave him only the truth of a completed task, not the tenderness of anticipating one. Finally, he asked, Are you unwell? Hannah looked up then, only because the question deserved an answer, not because her heart dragged her eyes toward him. Nathan Whitlock stood in the doorway, dark and immaculate, his gray eyes fixed on her in a way that would have undone her once. Today it did not. No, she said softly. I am only tired. His expression shifted. Not much. Enough. Tired of what? Hannah held his gaze calmly, looking at someone who never looked back. Silence settled into the archive. Nathan did not answer. Perhaps because no one had ever spoken to him that gently and still taken something away. Hannah lowered her eyes to the ledger again. Not in submission. In release. And for the first time in 5 years, when Alpha King Nathan Whitlock stood close enough to be admired, Hannah Miller chose not to look. The first thing Nathan Whitlock noticed was the tea. Not the court. Not the missing documents. Not the way Hannah Miller had looked at him in the archive and said she was tired of looking at someone who never looked back. The tea. It was too sweet. Nathan sat at the head of the council table with the Greyhaven Border Index open before him and a black porcelain cup untouched near his right hand. Steam lifted from the surface, carrying the faint scent of honey. He disliked honey in black tea. Everyone close to him knew that. Or rather, he corrected himself as his fingers paused against the page. One person had known that. The council discussed border tariffs around him. Marcus Hale spoke about road permissions. Elder Pierce argued about river rights. A clerk fumbled with a stack of maps near the far wall. Nathan heard all of it. None of it held. His attention kept returning to the cup. A small thing. Ridiculous. Unworthy of the Alpha King's focus. And yet it sat there like proof. Hannah had not corrected it. For 5 years, tea had arrived bitter enough to match his preference before he asked. Military documents had appeared in black ink before blue could irritate him. Treaty copies had been marked at the exact places where nobles tried to hide their clever little traps. He had called that efficiency. He had called her reliable. He had called her useful. Now usefulness was absent from the room, and everything felt slightly wrong. Not broken. Worse. Uncared for. Marcus cleared his throat. Your Majesty? Nathan looked up. The room had gone quiet. How long has the Western Road clause been missing? Nathan asked. The clerk paled. Missing? Nathan turned the border index around and tapped the empty margin. There should be a reference to the winter toll agreement here. The clerk looked down quickly. I will find it. Hannah would have already found it. Elder Pierce muttered before thinking better of it. Silence. The sentence landed harder than it should have. Nathan's gaze lifted. Elder Pierce lowered his eyes immediately. Forgive me, Your Majesty. Nathan did not answer. Because the man was right. That irritated him first, then unsettled him. By noon, the list of small failures had become impossible to ignore. A visiting envoy was placed in the wrong waiting room. The wrong seal was pressed onto a minor trade letter. Marcus handed Nathan a military report written in blue ink. Blue. Nathan stared at it for several seconds. Marcus noticed too late. I'll have it copied. Nathan's voice was flat. Why was it copied this way? The archive staff said Miss Miller had not reviewed it. Miss Miller. Not Hannah. The title felt suddenly inadequate, as if the name everyone had used for years had been designed to keep her at a manageable distance. Nathan stood. The council paused immediately. Continue without me. Marcus frowned. My king, the Greyhaven envoy, can wait. He left before anyone could object. The palace corridors opened before him with familiar obedience. Servants bowed. Guards straightened. Pages moved aside. Everything still recognized him as king. Everything except the thing he had begun looking for. At the end of the eastern corridor, Hannah's usual place near the council alcove was empty. The narrow table where she once sorted documents held only an inkstand and a stack of blank parchment. No small notes in her careful handwriting. No ribboned folders. No quiet presence waiting before he needed to call. Nathan stopped there. He had walked past this table hundreds of times. Perhaps thousands. He could not remember ever stopping to look at it. That realization made something tighten beneath his ribs. A servant approached with a fresh document and froze when he saw Nathan standing in front of the empty alcove. "Your Majesty? Where is Miss Miller?" The servant's eyes flickered toward the archive hall. "I believe she requested reassignment for the afternoon." Nathan turned slowly. "Reassignment? To the Southern Records Room? Why?" "I don't know, Your Majesty." Of course he did not. No one had needed to know why Hannah did things as long as she did them. Nathan moved toward the Southern Records Room with a pace that made conversation die before he passed. He found her inside, standing on a small ladder, sliding old border ledgers into place. No one else was there. Dust moved through the light from the high window. Hannah wore a simple cream dress, her soft pale face half turned toward the shelves, round cheeks flushed faintly from effort. A loose strand of brown hair had slipped near her temple. For years, he had seen that face at the edge of rooms, or thought he had. Now, with her attention turned away from him, Nathan realized seeing a person and knowing where they stood were not the same thing. Hannah. She did not startle. She placed the ledger carefully on the shelf before looking down. "Yes, Your Majesty." Again, the title. Polite, clean, distant. "I need the winter toll agreement. It is in the fourth drawer of the council archive. Left side, marked with a black thread." "You knew that without looking?" "Yes." "Then why was it not in the border index?" Hannah climbed down from the ladder. Slowly, steadily. "I was not asked to prepare the border index today." Nathan stared at her. "You always prepare it." "Yes." The word gave him nothing. No accusation. No apology. Only the simple fact of a habit she had stopped carrying for him. His jaw tightened. "This is about last night." Hannah looked at him. Not sharply. Not wounded. That almost bothered him more. Partly. She folded her hands in front of her. Last night was not the first night. Nathan had no answer for that. The silence in the records room felt different from council silence. There, silence obeyed him. Here, it belonged to her. He stepped closer. Not much. Enough that the dust between them shifted. "You are angry." "Yes." "Then say that." "I just did." His eyes narrowed. "You are being deliberately difficult." A faint expression crossed her face. Not amusement. Something quieter. Disappointment without surprise. "No," Hannah said. "I am being less useful." The word struck him cleanly. Useful. His own word. Returned without violence. He remembered Marcus's voice in the library. "She watches you as if you hung the moon." "I know." "And you allow it?" "She asks for nothing." "That makes her useful." Nathan had said it as fact. Now he heard it as she must have heard it. Small. Cold. A cruelty polished smooth by convenience. "Hannah." No, her voice remained soft. "Please do not say my name as if it repairs anything." He stopped. No one spoke to him like that. Not harshly. Not loudly. Gently. As if denying him did not require anger anymore. Nathan looked at her, truly looked, and the recognition unsettled him. She was not dramatic. Not pleading. Not trying to punish him. She had simply removed the part of herself that used to reach for him before he asked. And the room felt emptier for it. "I did not know you heard," he said. Hannah's eyes held his. "That is not the same as wishing you had not said it." Again, no answer. The truth left him nowhere to stand comfortably. From the hallway outside, a page called nervously, "Your Majesty? The Greyhaven envoy has arrived." Nathan did not turn. Hannah did. That was when he saw it. She looked toward the door, not toward him. Toward duty. Toward escape. Toward any place where he was not the center. For 5 years, Nathan had been watched by her with quiet devotion so constant he had mistaken it for atmosphere. Now the atmosphere had changed, and he was finally cold. "Will you attend the envoy meeting?" he asked. Hannah picked up another ledger. "No," Nathan went still. "You are assigned to border records. I requested reassignment. I did not approve it." She looked back at him. Calm. Clear. Free in a way that made his authority feel suddenly clumsy. "No," she said. "But I did." The page outside stopped breathing. Nathan heard it. Hannah did too. Neither looked away. For the first time, the Alpha King understood that a woman did not need to leave the palace to become unreachable. Sometimes she only had to stop waiting at the edge of his command. He stood in the records room, surrounded by shelves of old treaties and dust, while Hannah Miller turned back to her work. Not because she had forgotten him, because she had finally remembered herself. And as Nathan watched her choose the next ledger without asking what he needed, He realized the absence he had felt all morning was not incompetence in the palace. It was the withdrawal of a love he had never earned, only used. Nathan Whitlock waited until the envoy meeting ended before he found Hannah Miller again. Not because he wanted to wait, because for the first time in years, wanting something from Hannah did not make her appear. The Greyhaven envoy meeting had gone poorly. Not disastrously. Worse. Awkwardly. The treaty copy had been corrected, but not softened. The winter toll agreement had been located, but no one remembered why Greyhaven hated the third clause. Marcus mispronounced the envoy's family name. Twice. A junior clerk brought the wrong map, and Nathan had spent 4 silent seconds staring at a blue-inked military note before realizing Hannah was not there to replace it. The room had been full. Advisors. Guards. Envoys. Clara West seated near the diplomatic table in green silk, elegant and attentive. Still, something had been missing. No quiet figure near the side wall. No careful hand placing the right paper before his irritation sharpened. No soft voice murmuring, "The second clause, Your Majesty," before he asked. Nathan had once believed power meant never needing anyone. Today, it felt like standing in a crowded room and finding no one knew where the floor had gone. He found Hannah near the northern corridor after sunset. She was carrying a small stack of archive ledgers, walking alone beneath the tall windows where evening rain had left the glass silver and dark. Her steps were unhurried. Her expression was calm, not fragile, not wounded in a way he could easily enter. That unsettled him most. "Hannah." She stopped, slowly, then turned. "Yes, Your Majesty." The title struck him again. Clean as glass, cold as distance. Nathan stepped closer. "Why do you no longer look at me?" The question came out before pride could reshape it. Hannah's hands tightened slightly around the ledgers. Only slightly. Her face did not change. For one long second, she simply looked at him. Not like before. Not with that quiet, devoted attention he had grown so used to breathing inside. This look was different. Steady. Measured. Almost kind. Like she was seeing him clearly and finding no reason to make him larger than he was. "Because I finally saw myself," she said. Silence entered the corridor. Nathan stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means I mistook your shadow for shelter." His jaw tightened. "That is unfair." "No," Hannah said softly. "It is late. There is a difference." The words landed strangely. Not sharp. Still cutting. Nathan looked at the ledgers in her arms, at the simple cream dress, at the loose strand of brown hair resting beside her soft round cheek. He had seen those details before, surely. He must have. But memory refused to support him. In his mind, Hannah was always carrying something. A folder, a tray, a report, an answer. He could not remember the last time he had looked at her with empty hands. That realization shamed him, though he did not yet know what to do with shame. "You are angry because of what I said." "Yes." "Then let me explain." Hannah's eyes lifted to his. "I heard enough." "No, you heard part of a conversation. I heard the part where you knew." Nathan went still. That was the part he had avoided naming. Hannah continued, voice calm enough to be merciless. "You knew I admired you. You knew I asked for nothing. You knew I would show up before you called, fix things before you noticed, and stand close enough to help without embarrassing you by wanting to be chosen." His hand closed once at his side. "Hannah, no." She shook her head once. "Please don't soften your voice now. I know what it sounds like when you choose tenderness. I saw it last night." Clara. He understood immediately. The cloak. The balcony. The way he had noticed cold shoulders across a crowded room. Nathan looked away first. Only for a moment. It was enough. Hannah saw it. "Do you care for her?" she asked. The question was quiet. Too quiet to be accusation. "I barely know her." "But you noticed her." The corridor seemed to narrow around that sentence. Nathan had no answer clean enough to offer. Hannah lowered her gaze to the ledgers, not in submission, but because she no longer needed his face to finish speaking. 5 years ago, you gave me a cloak in the snow and told me to stay close because it was safer near you." His expression changed. He remembered. Of course he remembered. Not the way she did. Not as a beginning. As an incident. A small act of decency buried beneath wars, councils, coronations, duties. Hannah shifted the ledgers to one arm and reached into the pocket of her dress. When her hand opened, a silver ribbon lay across her palm. Old. Carefully kept. Softened by years of touch. Nathan looked at it. "What is that?" A faint smile touched her mouth. Not happy, not bitter. Worse, gentle. The ribbon from your cloak. His eyes returned to hers. Something like understanding moved behind them, slow and unwelcome. You kept it. For 5 years. The admission should have embarrassed her. It did not. Embarrassment belonged to the girl who thought loving quietly made her noble. The woman standing in the corridor had already survived being seen too late. I thought it meant something, Hannah said. Nathan's voice lowered. It did. No. She closed her fingers around the ribbon once, then opened them again. It meant you were kind for a moment. I turned that moment into a promise because I was lonely. Rain tapped faintly from the window ledges. Nathan did not move. Hannah stepped forward and placed the ribbon into his hand. The contact lasted less than a breath. Still, his fingers tightened as if something had been returned too late to hold properly. I mistook kindness for a promise, she said. That was my mistake. Letting me do it for 5 years was yours. The corridor went completely still. Nathan looked down at the ribbon in his palm. It was almost weightless. That made it worse. 5 years of devotion reduced to a thin strip of silver fabric he had never known she carried. 5 years of being watched, helped, protected in invisible ways. 5 years of accepting her attention as if it were a natural resource instead of a woman giving pieces of herself away quietly. I never asked you to love me, he said. The words left him before he knew how cruel they sounded. Hannah did not flinch. That told him they had landed too late. No, she said. You only made use of it. His mouth closed. No defense came, because the truth had reached him before pride could. A page appeared at the far end of the corridor and immediately froze, sensing the shape of something private. Nathan did not dismiss him. Hannah did not look over. She adjusted the ledgers in her arms. I have requested transfer to the Greyhaven Envoy office. Nathan's head lifted. What? The position opens next week. I recommended myself this morning. You cannot simply leave royal service. I am not leaving royal service. I am leaving yours. The difference cut deeper. Nathan stepped closer. I did not approve this. Hannah met his eyes. There was no fear in her face. No defiance staged for victory. Only a quiet line drawn where endless patience used to be. You do not have to approve who I become when I stop waiting for you. For a moment, Nathan looked at her as if the woman before him had appeared from nowhere. But she had not. She had been there for years. Behind pillars. Beside archives. Near council doors. Holding the exact answers he needed. He had mistaken her closeness for permanence. Her silence for consent. Her admiration for something that could not run out. Now he stood in the northern corridor with an old silver ribbon in his hand. And for the first time, the Alpha King had no command that could return what he had wasted. Hannah, he said again. But her name no longer opened her. She stepped back. Not far. Far enough. I am done looking up at you, your majesty. Then she turned and walked toward the archive wing. This time, Nathan watched. Truly watched. The soft fall of her hair. The steady way she carried the ledgers. The calm in her shoulders now that they no longer bent beneath the hope of being noticed. He watched until she disappeared around the corner. Only then did he look down at the ribbon. A small silver thing. A forgotten kindness. A misunderstood promise. A devotion returned after it had outlived the girl who kept it. And somewhere in the silence she left behind, Nathan Whitlock finally understood that admiration did not disappear all at once. It folded itself carefully, placed itself in your hand, and walked away. The next royal court began without Hannah Miller behind the pillars. That was the first thing Nathan Whitlock saw. Not the Greyhaven envoy. Not Clara West seated near the diplomatic table. Not the council elders watching him with careful faces after rumors of Hannah's transfer request had already begun moving through the palace like smoke. The pillars. The empty space beside them. For 5 years, Hannah had stood there so quietly that Nathan had stopped registering her presence as something separate from the architecture of his rule. Marble pillar. Silver banner. Quiet girl with the right answer. Now one of those things was gone. And somehow the room felt uneven. Nathan sat on the throne, the old silver ribbon folded inside his palm, hidden beneath his closed fingers. He had not meant to bring it with him. He had found it on his desk before dawn and picked it up without thinking. A ridiculous thing. A strip of fabric. Still, he had carried it into court like evidence. Below the throne, Marcus Hale cleared his throat. Your Majesty, the Greyhaven Envoy Office has submitted its staffing update. Nathan's eye sharpened. Read it. Marcus hesitated. Only briefly. Hannah Miller has been accepted as assistant liaison to the Greyhaven Envoy Office, effective immediately after today's court session. A murmur passed through the room. Small, controlled, hungry. Nathan did not move. Effective immediately. The words had the cold precision of a door closing without being slammed. On whose authority? He asked. Marcus looked down at the parchment. On the authority of the Royal Administrative Charter. Miss Miller's current position is archival and advisory, not bonded personal service. She may transfer between diplomatic departments with approval from the receiving office. Nathan's jaw tightened. And who approved it? A voice answered from the lower aisle. I did, Your Majesty. The room turned. Hannah stood near the central doors. Not behind a pillar. Not half hidden near the side wall. In the open. She wore a simple ivory dress with a dark blue travel cloak fastened at her shoulders. No silver ribbon around her wrist. No folders clutched to her chest like a shield. Her soft, pale face was calm, her round cheeks warmed slightly by the cold outside, her gentle eyes steady in a way that made the entire room quiet. Nathan looked at her, truly looked, and hated that the room had to lose her before his eyes learned how to stop passing over her. Hannah stepped forward with a sealed document in her hand. Each step sounded clear against the marble. Not loud, clear. The court watched her the way it had never watched her when she was saving them from their own mistakes. She stopped several paces below the throne and bowed. Not deeply, correctly. Your Majesty. The title was flawless. That made it worse. Nathan's hand closed around the ribbon. You approved your own transfer? I submitted my recommendation, Hannah said. The Greyhaven office accepted it. You are needed here. Silence fell. Not because he had raised his voice. Because everyone heard what he had not said. Not wanted. Needed. Hannah heard it too. Her expression did not change. I have been needed here for 5 years. Nathan stared at her. The sentence was soft enough that no one could call it disrespectful. Sharp enough that no one could mistake it for obedience. She lifted the document. I came to submit my final archive notes. The border histories are organized by year. The disputed road agreements are marked in black thread. The T preferences of foreign delegates are listed in the front ledger because apparently that information becomes important only when I am not here to remember it. A few faces lowered. Marcus looked away first. Nathan did not. He could not. Hannah placed the document on the clerk's table. Neatly. Of course. Even leaving, she made the palace easier to survive. That realization hurt him more than accusation would have. You could have told me, Nathan said. Hannah looked up at him. I did. No. You walked away. I told you I was tired of looking at someone who never looked back. The court went completely still. The words should have embarrassed him. They did. But not for the reason he expected. He was not ashamed that others heard her. He was ashamed that she had needed witnesses for him to understand what she had said in private. Clara West sat near the diplomatic table, hands folded, expression unreadable. She was beautiful, graceful, politically useful. Nathan looked at her and felt nothing resembling what he had been trying to name since yesterday. Then he looked back at Hannah. There it was. The absence with a face. The warmth he had mistaken for service. The devotion he had noticed only after it was withdrawn. Hannah, he said. Her name sounded too personal in court. Too late in his mouth. She waited. Not hopefully. That was the part that broke something cleanly inside him. I was wrong, he said. Murmurs stirred, then died. An Alpha King did not confess error easily. Nathan did not care. Not in that moment. The throne beneath him felt absurdly high. I knew you admired me, he continued, voice lower. And I allowed myself to benefit from what I did not deserve. Hannah's eyes softened slightly. Not with forgiveness. With recognition that truth had finally arrived, late and out of breath. Yes, she said. Only that. Yes. No relief. No gratitude. No collapse into the apology she had once deserved. Nathan stood. The room shifted instantly. Guard straightened. Advisor stiffened. But Hannah did not step back. That steadiness held him in place more effectively than any command could have. I can change the transfer, he said. No, a single word. Gentle. Absolute. Nathan stopped. The old Nathan would have overruled the charter, reassigned clerks, forced delay through procedure, called it order. The ribbon in his palm reminded him what control had already cost. Hannah continued, I am not leaving because the paperwork allows me to. I am leaving because I finally do. Because I finally do. Not can. Do. Choice, not permission. Nathan looked at her soft face beneath the candlelight. The face he had thought too familiar to study. The woman he had mistaken for a constant. The girl who had once kept a ribbon from a winter cloak and turned his careless kindness into 5 years of silent loyalty. "I never meant to make you feel unseen," he said. I know. That should have comforted him. It did not. Because Hannah knew the difference between intention and impact better than anyone in the room. "I also know," she added softly, "that being unseen by accident does not hurt less when it happens every day." No one breathed for a moment. Nathan lowered his gaze to the ribbon in his hand. Then he stepped down from the throne. The court watched in stunned silence as the Alpha King descended the silver steps and stopped before Hannah Miller. He opened his hand. The ribbon lay across his palm. Small, faded, carefully folded. "I do not know how to return 5 years," he said. Hannah looked at the ribbon. For a moment, the girl from the snow festival seemed to pass through her eyes. Young, cold, hopeful. Then she was gone. "You cannot," she said. Nathan's throat tightened. Hannah reached out and touched the ribbon with 2 fingers. Not taking it, only acknowledging what it had been. "Keep it," she said. His brows drew together. "I thought you were returning it." "I was." Her voice remained calm. "Now I am leaving it with the person who should remember what small kindness can cost when it is accepted without care." The words entered him slowly, settled deeply, stayed. Hannah stepped back. Then she turned toward the Greyhaven envoy table, where an older woman in diplomatic gray rose and inclined her head with quiet respect. Not pity, respect. Hannah walked to her new place. Not behind a pillar. Not waiting at the edge of Nathan's command. Beside the envoy desk. In view of the court, the room watched her sit. For the first time, not as the useful woman with the answers. As someone who had chosen where she belonged. Nathan remained at the foot of the throne steps with the ribbon in his hand. Court resumed around him eventually. It had to. Kingdoms always pretended they could continue. "Marcus, read the next matter." The Greyhaven envoy spoke. Clara West looked toward Hannah with something almost like understanding. But Nathan heard little of it. His eyes moved once, without permission, toward the envoy desk. Hannah was listening to a border proposal, pen in hand, calm and attentive. Then the Greyhaven envoy leaned closer and asked her opinion. Asked, not ordered, not assumed. Asked. Hannah answered. The court listened. Nathan watched the room adjust around the sound of her voice. And there, in the middle of the court he had ruled for years, Alpha King Nathan Whitlock finally saw Hannah Miller fully. Her softness, her intelligence, her quiet discipline, her tired dignity, the gentle strength it had taken to love without demanding, and the greater strength it had taken to stop. He saw her, at last, but Hannah did not look back. Not once. And that was how Nathan learned the difference between being admired and being forgiven. After court, the palace began speaking about Hannah Miller as if she had become visible by accident. Her name moved through corridors. Not loudly. Never loudly. The Whitlock Palace had always preferred its cruelty polished. Servants whispered near linen carts. Clerks paused over ledgers. Guards exchanged brief glances when she passed in the blue cloak of the Greyhaven envoy office instead of the plain cream shawl she had worn for years in the archive wing. Hannah heard pieces of it. She really transferred. His Majesty allowed it. I heard she spoke to him in open court. I heard he apologized. No, not apologized. Admitted fault. That cannot be true. Hannah walked through all of it with a folder beneath one arm and her chin level. She had spent 5 years being unseen. Being seen now did not feel like triumph. It felt like walking across thin ice while everyone waited to hear if she would fall through. The Greyhaven envoy office had been given 3 rooms in the northern wing, far enough from the throne to feel like another world, close enough to remind her that freedom sometimes began inside the same walls that had caged her. The rooms smelled of parchment, rain-soaked wool, and black coffee. Not royal incense. Not polished cedar. Not Nathan's council chamber. That helped. At the center desk sat Margaret Ellis, the senior Greyhaven envoy, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with silver threaded through dark hair and a patience that looked dangerous when mistaken for weakness. She looked up when Hannah entered. Close the door, Miss Miller. Hannah did. The voices outside softened into nothing. Margaret studied her for a moment. Regret follows powerful men loudly, she said, even when they try to make it quiet. Hannah held the folder a little closer. I did not come here to punish him. I know. The answer came too quickly to be flattery. Margaret removed her spectacles and placed them on the desk. That is why I accepted your transfer. Hannah went still. Margaret continued. If you wanted revenge, you would have stayed close enough to watch him suffer. You asked for work instead. Work. The word used to feel like a chain. In this room, it almost felt like ground. I know the Blackwood border disputes, Hannah said. The old river agreements. The missing winter clauses. The names of the families who still resent the crown. You know more than that. Hannah looked at her. Margaret's expression did not soften, but her voice did. You know what it costs to keep someone else's world intact while yours is quietly shrinking. Silence. Hannah did not trust herself to answer immediately. The room remained still around her. Not empty. Still. There was a difference. Finally, she said, I would like to be useful here. Margaret leaned back. No, Hannah blinked. The refusal was gentle. That made it harder to understand. Margaret pointed to the chair across from her desk. Sit. Hannah sat. Not because she was ordered. Because she had been invited into a conversation instead of positioned for service. Margaret folded her hands. You may be skilled here. You may be respected here. You may be paid properly, credited properly, and disagreed with openly. But I did not bring you into this office so you could become useful to another set of people who forget to see you. Something moved in Hannah's chest. Small. Painful. Almost warm. I don't know how to be anything else yet, she admitted. The truth left quietly. It did not embarrass her. That was new. Margaret nodded once, as if the answer was neither weakness nor surprise. Then start by learning what you prefer when no one is asking you to anticipate theirs. Hannah looked down at her hands. For years, she had known Nathan's tea, Nathan's ink, Nathan's moods, Nathan's silences, Nathan's wounds, Nathan's political instincts. No one had ever asked what she preferred. Not even Hannah. Outside the office, footsteps approached and stopped near the door. The room changed before the knock came. Hannah knew it. Her body knew it. That familiar pressure in the air. Command restrained behind manners. Nathan. Margaret glanced toward the door, then back at Hannah. Do you want me to answer it? The question was simple. It should not have felt like mercy. Hannah's fingers tightened once around the edge of her folder, then relaxed. No, she said. I will. She stood and crossed the room. For 1 second, her hand rested on the door handle while old instinct rose inside her. Open quickly. Do not keep him waiting. Fix the discomfort before it becomes anger. Then she let the instinct pass. Nathan knocked again. This time, slower. Not impatient. Uncertain. Hannah opened the door. Alpha King Nathan Whitlock stood in the corridor without advisors, without guards, without crown. His black coat was immaculate. His face was controlled. But his hand held the silver ribbon. Hannah looked at it. Then at him. Your Majesty. The title placed the distance between them before either of them could pretend it was gone. Nathan's gaze moved past her for half a second, toward the Greyhaven office behind her. Not possessive. Not openly. But something in his eyes tightened when he saw the new desk, the new files, the place where she belonged without waiting for his command. I came to return this, he said. He lifted the ribbon. Hannah did not reach for it. I told you to keep it. I know. His voice was lower than she remembered it being in court. Less king. More man with nowhere safe to put his regret. I do not deserve to keep it. Hannah's expression remained calm. That was not why I left it with you. Nathan absorbed that. Slowly. Behind Hannah, Margaret did not speak. That silence strengthened the room instead of making Hannah smaller inside it. Nathan looked at Hannah again. I spent the afternoon trying to remember the winter festival. Her breath caught before she could stop it. Only a little. Enough that he saw. His face changed with the knowledge that he still had the power to touch old wounds, and that power no longer felt like something he should use carelessly. I remembered giving you the cloak, he said. I remembered the snow. The messages on the ground. I remembered telling you to stay close. Hannah's voice was quiet. I know, but I did not remember your face. There it was. Not cruelty. Worse. Truth. For a moment, the corridor seemed to lose all sound. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he did not look away. I remembered the act, he said. Not the person it changed. Hannah should have hated him for saying it. Instead, she felt the final shape of what had happened between them become clear. Her devotion had not been born from a lie he told her. It had been born from a meaning he never noticed she carried. That did not make it painless. It made it survivable. Thank you for telling me the truth, she said. Nathan flinched slightly. Perhaps he had expected anger. Perhaps he had wanted it. Anger would have given him something to meet. Her calm left him only with consequence. I am sorry, he said. This time, the words did not sound like strategy. They sounded unfinished. Hannah nodded once. I believe you. Hope moved across his face before he could hide it. She saw it. And because she was not cruel, she ended it gently. But I am not coming back to your service. The hope died quietly. Nathan looked down at the ribbon. I know. A pause. Then, softer, I am beginning to. That sentence entered Hannah differently from all the others. Not enough to pull her backward. Enough to mark that he had finally stopped using command where understanding was required. From inside the office, Margaret's voice came calm and clear. Miss Miller, the Eastern correspondence? Hannah looked back. A task. A real one. One that belonged to her new work, not his need. She turned to Nathan again. I have to go. The old Nathan would have hated being dismissed. This Nathan looked as if he had expected no better and still deserved worse. Yes, he said. Hannah began to close the door, then stopped. Not for him. For herself. Nathan. His eyes lifted at the sound of his name without title. Just once. Just enough. Small kindness matters, she said. So does what people build from it when they are lonely. Be careful with both. He closed his hand around the ribbon. I will. Hannah did not know if that was true. It was no longer her work to make it true. She closed the door softly. Inside the Greyhaven office, Margaret slid a fresh file across the desk. Hannah returned to her chair. Her hands were steady when she opened it. Outside, Nathan Whitlock remained in the corridor for several seconds with the ribbon in his palm, facing a closed door he could not command open. And inside that room, for the first time in 5 years, Hannah Miller began learning the shape of a life that did not require her to be admired, needed, or chosen by him in order to matter. The first week in the Greyhaven Envoy office taught Hannah Miller how quiet respect could be. It did not arrive with music, or applause, or a king finally looking at her across a crowded room. It arrived in smaller ways. Margaret Ellis asking, "What do you think?" before deciding on a border reply. A junior clerk waiting for Hannah to finish speaking before correcting a map. A chair left open beside the main desk because someone had expected her to sit there, not stand behind it. Coffee offered with the question, "How do you take yours?" Hannah had not known how to answer that one. She had stood there for a second too long, looking at the dark cup in the clerk's hand, and realized she knew Nathan's tea with painful precision, but could not remember the last time she had chosen anything without measuring it against someone else's preference. Plain, she had said finally. Then, after a pause, with cream. The clerk had nodded. No one laughed. No one made the smallness of the answer feel shameful. That almost undid her. By the fourth day, Hannah's desk held 3 stacks of work: Greyhaven border grievances, old Whitlock road promises, and unresolved winter toll agreements Nathan's counsel had ignored for years because no one powerful had cared enough to read them fully. Hannah read every page. Not for Nathan. Not to prove her worth. Because the villages named in the margins had lives inside them. Farmers who lost coin at frozen crossings. Widows charged twice for river passage. Children walking unsafe roads because old treaties had been written by men who never had to use them. The work was not glamorous. It was not romantic. It mattered. That was enough. Near noon, Margaret placed a fresh file on Hannah's desk. The Eastern Ridge complaint, she said. You noticed the missing clause in the old copy? Hannah nodded. It was removed between the second and third revision. By whom? Whitlock Council. Margaret's mouth tightened. Can you prove that? Hannah lifted a separate page. Yes. For a moment, Margaret only looked at her. Then she gave a small nod. Well done. 2 words. Simple. Professional. Clean. Hannah felt them settle differently than Nathan's good ever had. No hunger followed. No foolish warmth begging to become hope. Just the steady satisfaction of being seen for work she had actually done, not used for work no one wanted to admit depended on her. Outside the office windows, the palace courtyard glittered after rain. Guards crossed the stones. Pages hurried between wings. Somewhere beyond the northern arch stood the throne room Nathan still ruled with winter certainty. Hannah rarely saw him now, not because he stopped existing in the palace, because she stopped arranging herself along his path. That difference changed more than she expected. The building looked different when she did not measure every corridor by the chance of his appearing. The mornings widened. The evenings softened. Her own thoughts became louder, sometimes painfully so. On the sixth evening, she found herself alone in the records annex, copying a disputed road clause by lamplight. The rest of the office had gone to supper. Rain whispered beyond the high windows. The room smelled of ink and dust. For the first time in days, memory crept in without being summoned. Nathan in the winter courtyard. Nathan at the library door. Nathan holding the silver ribbon like a man who had only learned the cost of something after losing the right to pay for it. I am sorry. I believe you. But I am not coming back. Her pen paused. The words still hurt. Not because she regretted them. Because healing did not mean the past became painless. It only meant pain no longer gave orders. A soft knock sounded. Hannah looked up. Clara West stood in the doorway. For a moment, Hannah said nothing. Clara looked different outside the ballroom. Still beautiful, but less polished somehow, wrapped in a simple green shawl instead of silk, her golden hair pinned loosely at the back of her neck. No guards. No admirers. No Nathan beside her. May I come in? Clara asked. Hannah's first instinct was caution, not hatred. Hannah had never hated Clara. That would have been easier and less honest. Clara had not stolen tenderness from her. Nathan had simply shown where he was willing to place it. Yes, Hannah said. Clara entered and closed the door behind her. The silence between them was careful. Clara glanced at the papers on the desk. You're still working. So are you, apparently. A faint smile touched Clara's mouth. I was trying to avoid the supper hall. Hannah waited. Clara folded her hands in front of her. I owe you an apology. That was not what Hannah expected. For what? For enjoying being noticed without asking who was not being seen. The room became very still. Clara looked down. I knew there was history. Not details. But enough. Women in courts always know when another woman has been trained to stand too close to pain. Her voice softened. I should have been kinder. Hannah studied her. The old Hannah might have rushed to comfort her. No, it is not your fault. Please do not feel bad. Let me make even this easier for someone else. Instead, she let the apology remain where Clara placed it. Accepted, not erased. Thank you, Hannah said. Clara nodded once. A breath passed. Then Clara said, he looks for you. Hannah's hand stilled on the page. Clara continued, not openly. Not well. But he does. In rooms. At doorways. When someone brings the wrong file. When someone says your name. Hannah looked at the ink drying beneath her pen. The words entered her chest. They did not bloom. They only ached. He noticed late, she said. Yes. Clara's answer held no defense of him. That made Hannah look up. Clara's expression was honest. Almost sad. I think powerful men believe regret should impress us because it feels so large to them when it finally arrives. Hannah almost smiled. This time, the almost did not hurt. And to us? She asked. Clara's gaze moved to the rain-dark window. To us, it often looks like a man grieving the comfort he lost before he understands the woman he harmed. Silence settled again. Not hostile. Human. Hannah leaned back slowly. For the first time, Clara West stopped being the woman Nathan noticed. She became a woman standing in the same palace, naming the same pattern from another angle. That mattered, more than Hannah wanted to admit. Clara turned toward the door. I won't keep you. Hannah, she said, then paused as if testing whether the name belonged to apology or beginning. For what it's worth, I told him not to come to the envoy office again unless you ask. Hannah blinked. Clara gave a small shrug. He listened. That surprised her most. After Clara left, Hannah remained seated in the lamplight with the road clause unfinished before her. Nathan looked for her. Nathan listened. Nathan stayed away. Once, those truths would have been enough to pull her back into orbit. Now, they only sat beside her. Quiet. Real. Insufficient. Hannah dipped her pen again and finished copying the clause. Outside, rain softened against the glass. Inside, the office remained warm. Her chair was hers. Her work was hers. Her silence was hers. And when the clock struck 8, Hannah closed the file, stood, and left the annex for supper because she was hungry. Not because anyone needed her. Not because Nathan might be somewhere in the hall. Because her body had asked for care, and for once, she answered herself first. The formal border hearing took place 9 days after Hannah Miller stopped waiting for Alpha King Nathan Whitlock to see her. By then, the palace had learned a new kind of discomfort. Not chaos. Hannah had not vanished. She had not broken the kingdom. She had not left behind empty rooms and frantic orders. She still walked the same corridors. Still worked beneath the same roof. still bowed when rank required it. But she no longer moved like someone quietly belonging to Nathan's life. That was what unsettled him. Presence without devotion. Nearness without offering. A woman still visible, but no longer available to be taken for granted. The hearing hall was colder than usual that morning. Tall windows framed a pale sky. Silver banners hung behind the throne platform. Greyhaven representatives sat along the left table, Whitlock Council on the right. Between them, maps, old treaty copies, sealed complaints, and winter toll records covered the polished oak surface. Hannah sat beside Margaret Ellis. Not behind a pillar. Not at the edge of the room. Beside her, a chair pulled out for her before she arrived. A fresh cup of coffee near her hand, plain with cream. Across the hall, Nathan sat at the center of the royal table. No crown today. Only the black signet ring and the controlled stillness of a man trying to look like he had not spent 9 days learning the shape of absence. Hannah felt his gaze once, then let it pass. Margaret leaned closer. Ready? Hannah looked down at the folder in front of her. The Eastern Ridge complaint. The missing clause. The proof that Whitlock Council had quietly removed protections from 3 Greyhaven villages between treaty drafts. A week ago, she would have softened the presentation to protect Nathan from embarrassment. Today, she had prepared the truth cleanly. Not cruelly. Completely. Yes, Hannah said. The hearing began with Marcus Hale summarizing the Crown's position. His tone was polished. His sentences elegant. His omissions careful. Hannah listened. She marked nothing. She did not need to. She knew exactly where the lie sat. When Marcus finished, Elder Pierce nodded as if the matter were settled. The Crown acted within its authority, he said. Margaret's eyes shifted to Hannah. Not commanding. Inviting. Hannah stood. The hall quieted. A few councilmen looked surprised. Nathan did not. He only watched her with an intensity that once would have felt like sunlight. Now it felt like weather. Something present. Something she did not have to obey. Permission to clarify the document history, Hannah said. Nathan's voice came after one breath. Granted. The word held too much. Regret. Restraint. A king learning not to reach. Hannah opened the first folder. The original road agreement included winter passage protections for Greyhaven farmers, widows, and trade families crossing the Eastern Ridge during frozen months. Those protections appear in the first and second drafts. She placed 2 copies on the table. The third draft removes them. A councilman frowned. Revision during negotiation is not unusual. No, Hannah said. But unmarked removal is. Silence. She placed another page down. The margins of the second draft note that all social protections were to remain unchanged. The third draft removed them without council notation, envoy approval, or village acknowledgement. Elder Pierce's expression tightened. Marcus looked down. Nathan's eyes did not leave Hannah's face. She continued, voice steady. Which means the Crown collected tolls from families who were legally exempt under the negotiated terms. One of the Greyhaven representatives inhaled sharply. A Whitlock councilman muttered, That is an accusation. It is a record, Hannah corrected. The room went very still. Not because she had raised her voice. She had not. Because she had learned the strength of facts spoken without apology. Margaret sat quietly beside her, allowing the silence to support the truth instead of rushing to defend it. Nathan looked at the documents. Then at Marcus. Did council remove the clause? Marcus swallowed. It appears administrative staff may have. No, Hannah said. The word cut softly. Everyone turned back to her. She placed the final paper on the table. The removal was initialed by Elder Pierce and countersigned by Marcus Hale. Marcus went pale. Elder Pierce stood halfway. Miss Miller, you forget your place. The old Hannah would have gone cold. Would have apologized. Would have sat down before the room could decide she had become too much. Today, she looked at him. Calmly. No, she said. I finally understand it. Silence fell. Complete. Nathan stood. Every guard in the hall straightened. For one fragile second, Hannah thought he would protect the council, soften the accusation, turn the room back toward order. Old fear remembered faster than new freedom. Then Nathan spoke. Elder Pierce, sit down. Pierce froze. My king, sit. The elder sat. Nathan turned toward Hannah. Not over her. Not around her. To her. Continue, Miss Miller. Miss Miller. Professional. Public. Respectful. No forced intimacy. No late tenderness trying to buy forgiveness. Hannah felt the distinction settle somewhere deep. She nodded once. Then continued. The villages are owed repayment for 7 winters, with interest based on the original agreement. The current Eastern Ridge toll should be suspended until both offices approve a corrected draft. Margaret looked almost pleased. The Greyhaven table murmured approval. The Whitlock Council looked as though someone had opened a window in winter and called it justice. Nathan listened until Hannah finished. Then he looked at Marcus. Prepare repayment. Marcus's head lifted. Your Majesty, the Treasury impact should have been considered before the Crown profited from a hidden clause. No one spoke. Nathan's voice remained controlled, but something beneath it had changed. Not weakness. Accountability, perhaps. A new and uncomfortable garment on a powerful man. He turned to Elder Pierce. You will step down from treaty review pending investigation. Pierce went white. The hearing moved on after that, but the room never fully recovered. Neither did Hannah. Not in a painful way. In a strange way. A door inside her opened, and instead of finding grief behind it, she found herself. After the hearing, people stood in clusters, speaking carefully. Margaret gathered the files with efficient hands. Hannah reached for the Eastern Ridge folder, but Margaret stopped her. Leave it, she said. You did enough. Enough. Not useful. Enough. Hannah nodded and stepped toward the side corridor. She had almost reached the door when Nathan's voice followed her. Miss Miller. She stopped. Turned. He stood several paces away, the hearing hall still bright behind him. Marcus and the others watched from a distance, but Nathan did not seem to care. For once, he did not approach like a king expecting space to open. He stopped where he was. Thank you, he said. 2 simple words. No plea hidden inside them. No request for her to soften. No come back. Hannah studied him, then answered, You're welcome. His hand moved slightly at his side. She saw the edge of silver ribbon tucked beneath his fingers. Still there. Still kept. But no longer offered as a bridge she had not asked for. Nathan's gaze lowered briefly, then returned to her face. You were right, he said. About small kindness. About what people build from it. Hannah said nothing. He continued, quieter. I cannot undo what I let you build alone. No, she said. The word no longer felt cruel. Only true. Nathan accepted it. That mattered more than apology. I will not ask you to come back, he said. Hannah's breath slowed. Somewhere in her chest, an old locked thing released. Not because he had said the perfect words. Because he had finally stopped asking the wrong ones. Good, she said softly. A faint sadness moved through his eyes. He nodded once, then stepped aside. Not dramatically. Not as a performance. Simply making room for her to pass. Hannah walked past him. The distance between them was small enough that she could have touched his sleeve. She did not. Her body remembered loving him. Her heart remembered hurting. But her feet remembered the way forward. Outside the hearing hall, the corridor opened wide and pale beneath afternoon light. Greyhaven clerks waited near the end with fresh correspondence. Margaret called her name from behind. Hannah, we have another file. Hannah turned toward the voice. Toward work that mattered. Toward a chair that belonged to her. Toward a life where being seen did not require shrinking first. Behind her, Nathan remained in the doorway of the hearing hall, watching her leave. This time, Hannah knew he was looking. She simply did not need to look back to become real. The last time Hannah Miller stood in the royal court, she did not stand behind a pillar. That was what Nathan Whitlock noticed first. The second thing he noticed was that everyone else noticed too. Not because she entered loudly. Hannah had never needed volume to change a room. She entered beside Margaret Ellis and 2 Greyhaven clerks, carrying a slim folder against her chest. Her dark blue cloak rested neatly over a simple ivory dress. Her soft, pale face was calm, her round cheeks touched with warmth from the cold corridor outside. Her hair was pinned back with no ribbon at her wrist, no hidden piece of him worn close to her pulse. She looked like herself. That was the wound. For years, Nathan had seen her as something attached to his life. A quiet aid, a reliable answer, a devotion that did not ask questions. Now she looked complete without him. Court began. Voices rose and fell around the hearing hall. The Eastern Ridge repayment was approved. Greyhaven's winter passage protections were restored. Marcus Hale, pale and carefully polite, submitted corrected treaty copies in black ink. Nathan signed them. One by one. The room watched him more closely than usual. Powerful men were always watched when they corrected the damage they had once benefited from. When the final document reached him, Nathan paused. The silver ribbon rested inside his coat pocket. He had not worn it. He had not displayed it. He had only kept it there because some lessons deserved to press quietly against the heart until they were learned properly. He signed the last page, then looked toward Hannah. "Miss Miller." The court stilled. Hannah lifted her gaze. "Yes, Your Majesty." No flinch. No hope. No old softness rushing forward to meet the sound of his voice. Just attention, given because the room required it, not because her heart did. Nathan stood. For a moment, the old instinct moved through the hall. Guards straightened. Advisors lowered their eyes. Space prepared itself for his command. But Nathan did not command. He stepped down from the throne platform and stopped several paces away from her. The distance mattered. He understood that now. "I owe you a public acknowledgement," he said. Murmurs stirred, then died. Hannah's expression did not change, but her hands tightened slightly around the folder. Nathan saw it. A year ago, he would have missed it. A month ago, perhaps. "Your work protected this court for years," he continued. "Your memory, your judgment, your discipline, and your restraint kept more damage from reaching this throne than most of us ever deserved to know." The room had gone completely silent. Not the silence of fear. The silence of people realizing the truth had been present long before someone powerful finally named it. Nathan's gaze did not leave Hannah's face, and I mistook that for convenience. No one moved. Marcus looked down. Clara West, seated near the diplomatic table, lowered her eyes with something like respect. Nathan's voice remained steady, though the words cost him. "I allowed your silence to benefit me. I allowed your loyalty to become labor. I allowed your admiration to remain unanswered because it asked nothing of me." Hannah looked at him then. Really looked. Not the way she once had. Not as if he were the sun. As if he were a man finally standing inside his own shadow. "I am sorry," Nathan said. "Not because you left my service. Because you should not have had to leave it in order to be seen." The apology landed gently. Too late to repair. True enough not to be rejected. Hannah bowed her head once. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Your Majesty. The title hurt less now, because Nathan finally understood it as distance, not disrespect. For one foolish heartbeat, some old part of him wanted to ask if this changed anything. If recognition could become a bridge. If apology, spoken publicly and correctly, could return what private neglect had spent. But Hannah's face answered before he could shame them both. No. Not cruelly. Not angrily. Simply, no. Margaret Ellis stepped beside Hannah and placed a new document on the table. "The Greyhaven office has one final staffing notice." Nathan's hand stilled. Hannah opened the folder herself. "I have accepted a permanent appointment as Greyhaven's deputy liaison to Whitlock territory," she said. A murmur moved through the hall. Permanent. Nathan felt the word enter him and stay. "So you will remain in the palace," Marcus said carefully. Hannah looked toward him. "I will work in the palace," she corrected. "That is not the same thing." Nathan understood. At last, he understood distinctions he had once treated as decoration. Nearness was not devotion. Service was not surrender. Kindness was not promise. Knee was not love. Looking was not seeing. He nodded once. "Greyhaven is fortunate." The words surprised him. Not because they were polite. Because they contained no attempt to pull her back. Hannah seemed to recognize that too. Something softened in her eyes. Only slightly. Not forgiveness exactly. Peace, perhaps. "Thank you," she said again. Court resumed after that. Kingdoms always did. Documents were signed. Seals were pressed. Voices found their usual rhythm. But the room was different now, because Hannah sat at the Greyhaven table in full view, and when she spoke, people listened the first time. Nathan watched once. Only once. She was leaning over a map with Margaret, pointing to a ridge crossing with calm precision. A Greyhaven clerk asked her opinion. Hannah answered. The clerk wrote it down. No one called her useful. No one needed to. She mattered without being reduced to what she could provide. Nathan looked away first. It was the kindest thing he knew how to do now. After the hearing ended, he found the silver ribbon in his pocket and held it briefly beneath the table. He did not go to Hannah. He did not return it. He did not turn memory into another demand. Instead, later that evening, he placed the ribbon inside a small cedar box in his private study. No display. No shrine. Only a reminder. On the lid, he wrote 3 words in his own hand. Small kindness matters. Then he closed the box. Across the palace, in the Greyhaven office, Hannah sat beside an open window with a cup of coffee plain with cream warming her hands. Margaret had gone. The clerks had left. The day had finally loosened its grip. Outside, the courtyard glowed beneath early moonlight. For years, Hannah had looked across that courtyard toward Nathan's windows and wondered whether he might someday see her. Tonight, she looked at the sky instead. Wide, quiet, unclaimed. There was no dramatic joy in her chest. No sudden certainty that healing had completed itself. Only space. Enough space to breathe. Enough space to choose dinner because she was hungry. Enough space to think about tomorrow without arranging it around a man's shadow. A soft knock sounded at the open office door. Clara West stood there with 2 wrapped pastries in her hand. "I heard Greyhaven keeps terrible supper hours," Clara said. Hannah looked at her. Then, unexpectedly, smiled. "Only when the files are interesting." Clara held up the pastries. "Then consider this diplomacy." Hannah laughed softly. The sound surprised her. It did not break. It did not hurt. It simply existed. Later, when the palace grew quiet and the lamps burned low, Hannah walked back to her room alone. Not because no one cared, because solitude no longer felt like abandonment. At the end of the northern corridor, she passed the place where she had once waited for Nathan to notice her. She stopped. The pillar stood there, pale and polished, unchanged. For 5 years, it had hidden her. Or perhaps she had hidden behind it. Hannah touched the cool marble once. Not with grief. With farewell. Then she continued walking. No ribbon. No longing. No silent prayer that the Alpha King would turn and finally see her. He had looked at her after she let go. That was true. But by then, Hannah had learned something greater than being seen by him. She had learned how to stop disappearing from herself. And in the quiet palace corridor, beneath silver banners and moonlit stone, Hannah Miller walked forward without looking back, no longer the girl who admired the king from the shadows, but the woman who had stepped into her own life and found there was room enough for her there.